A single dad pulls over to fix a stranger's flat tire only to discover she secretly owns the entire chain of auto shops that's been pushing his family-owned garage toward closure. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The morning had teeth. Frost clung to the cracked windshield like spiderwebs, and the old truck groaned in protest as Jack Miller turned the key. He rubbed his gloved hands together, breath visible in the air, as he glanced at the rearview mirror. In the back seat, his daughter Lily tugged on her pink knit hat, her backpack already half-zipped, a corner of her sketchbook poking out. "You warm enough back there, Bug?" he asked, voice hoarse from the dry heat and lack of coffee. "I'm good, Daddy," she said with a sleepy smile, swinging her legs. "Do we have time to stop for cocoa?" Jack glanced at the dashboard clock and grimaced. "Only if we don't hit any surprises." He jinxed it within 10 minutes, up ahead, just past the bend where pine trees lined the road like sleepy sentinels. Hazard lights blinked in slow rhythm. A white SUV sat at a crooked angle on the shoulder, one side slumped as if the cold itself had punched it. A woman stood nearby, wrapped in a long coat that looked far too thin for this kind of morning. She paced, talking into her phone, her breath clouding the air. Jack slowed. "You gonna help her?" Lily asked, nose pressed to the window. Jack hesitated. He was already behind. The garage had 3 jobs lined up, rent was due next week, and the truck's gas tank was hovering near empty. But then he saw her face tight with frustration, but not panicked. Just tired. "Yeah," he said. "We're gonna help." He pulled over and stepped out. The cold hit like a slap. The woman turned, phone dropping to her side. Her eyes dark, sharp, but surprise met his. "You don't have to stop," she said quickly. "Roadside assistance is on their way." Jack nodded toward the tire. "You'll be waiting a while. Mind if I take a look?" A pause. Then she stepped back. "Be my guest." Jack knelt beside the wheel, already loosening the lug nuts. "Name's Jack," he said. She hesitated. "Claire." He offered a quick smile. "Nice to meet you, Claire. Looks like you picked a heck of a morning to blow a tire." She huffed a laugh, tucking her hands into her coat. "Tell me about it." Neither of them realized this frozen moment was the beginning of something far warmer. The spare was on in under 10 minutes. Jack worked quickly, hands steady despite the cold, his breath rising in sharp white bursts as he tightened the last lug nut. Claire stood off to the side, arms wrapped around herself, watching him in quiet disbelief. She'd offered to help, once got a look from him that said thanks, but no and hadn't tried again. He stood, brushing salt and grit off his jeans. "You're good to go," he said, nodding toward the SUV. Claire blinked. "That's it?" Jack shrugged, already walking toward his truck. "Yeah," she followed, boots crunching in the frozen gravel. "Let me at least pay you for your time," she said, digging in her purse. The leather bag looked expensive, though worn like she used it often. "It's only fair." Jack turned at the truck door, one hand resting on the handle. "You didn't call me." "I just stopped." "Still," she pressed, holding out a folded bill. "You helped me." He looked at it, then at her. "Look, I'm not doing this for a tip. Just pay it forward. Help someone else when they're stuck." Claire stared at him, something flickering behind her eyes. She nodded slowly and tucked the money back into her bag. "Okay. Thank you, Jack." He gave her a faint smile and opened the door. "Take it easy out there." As he climbed in, Lily leaned forward from the back seat. "Did you fix it?" "All set, kiddo," he said, starting the engine. Through the windshield, he caught Claire standing by her SUV, still watching them. Not with suspicion, not with judgment. Just thoughtful. "She looks fancy," Lily said, peering out the window. Jack chuckled. "Yeah. Bit out of place for Briarwood." He pulled back onto the road, tires crunching over frozen gravel, unaware that the woman he'd just helped wasn't some lost traveler or tourist in over her head. Claire Hartman. Natalie. Claire Hartman legally owned the largest auto chain in the state. The very one that had offered to buy out Miller's garage just last month. She hadn't expected to meet someone like Jack today, and he definitely hadn't expected that fixing a flat tire would change his entire future. The day blurred into the kind of ordinary that left Jack bone-tired by dinner. He dropped Lily at school just in time, hustled back to the garage, and spent the rest of the afternoon elbows deep in a busted transmission. By the time they got home, he could barely feel his feet, and Lily was half asleep at the kitchen table, still in her snow boots. He warmed up leftover stew while she colored in her sketchbook, humming to herself. The house was small, 2 bedrooms, cracked linoleum, drafty in the winter, but it was theirs. Jack tucked away the bills without opening them, promising himself he'd look tomorrow. Later, as he sorted through the clutter in the back seat of the truck, Lily's school papers, a lone mitten, a crushed juice box, spotted something wedged beneath the passenger seat. "Hey, Bug," he called through the open door. "You lose a card or something?" Lily appeared at the doorway, toothbrush in hand. "Huh?" Jack pulled it out. "Sleek, minimalist, high-end cardstock." One side was blank. On the other, Natalie Hartman, Chief Executive Officer, Hartman Auto Group. He frowned. The name hit like a cold snap. Lily patted closer, eyes squinting at the print. "Is that the lady from this morning?" Jack didn't answer right away. He turned the card over again, as if it might suddenly say something different. Hartman Auto Group, the same company that had sent a letter last month offering to relieve the burden of his aging shop. The same company he'd crumpled the offer from without replying. He stared out the windshield, thinking back to the white SUV, the flat tire, the woman in the too thin coat, calling herself Claire. She hadn't lied, not exactly, just hadn't told the whole truth. "Yeah," he said finally, slipping the card into his coat pocket. "I think it is." Lily tilted her head. "She seemed nice." "She did," Jack said quietly. But now he couldn't help but wonder why a woman like Natalie Hartman was stranded on a back road near Briarwood, and why she hadn't told him who she really was. The skyline outside Natalie Hartman's office glittered like a false promise, glass towers and cold steel reaching upward, untouchable. She sat behind her oversized mahogany desk, half listening to the quarterly review from her finance team, a stylus in one hand, a latte cooling in the other. They were talking numbers, growth projections, market saturation, expansion plans, things she normally tracked with laser focus. But today, her mind drifted. "Miss Hartman?" her CFO prompted gently. "We're recommending an aggressive Q2 acquisition strategy, starting with Briarwood. Small town market, minimal pushback. High brand alignment. Briarwood." Natalie's gaze shifted to the digital folder on her tablet marked Miller's Garage. The valuation was laughably low. The deal would be quick, seamless. Another tidy domino falling in Hartman Auto Group's national expansion, but all she could see was the grease-smudged smile of a man who'd knelt in the freezing cold to fix her flat tire without a second thought and without asking for a thing. "Not many people do that anymore," she murmured to herself. "Sorry?" the CFO asked. "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just thinking." She waved them off, ending the meeting early. Once the room cleared, Natalie stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, arms folded, phone buzzing unanswered on her desk behind her. Down below, the city pulsed with people, hurrying, shouting, closing deals, dodging meaning. In her world, generosity always had strings. Even kindness was strategic. But Jack Miller? He didn't even know who she was, and he'd helped her like it was instinct. No ego, no angle, just decent. That kind of real was rare. Maybe extinct. She pulled the card out of her coat pocket, the one she'd meant to give him if she ever ran into trouble again. Instead, she dropped it in his truck like a breadcrumb from a different world. Natalie turned it over in her fingers. Why didn't I tell him? Because for once, it had felt good to be anonymous. Just a woman with a flat tire. Not a CEO, not a brand, not a walking empire. She sat back down and opened a new tab. "Get me everything you can on Miller's Garage," she typed to her assistant. Quietly. And then she added one more line before she hit send. "I want to know who he really is." Natalie leaned back in her leather chair, staring at the screen as if the file would open itself. She'd reread her message twice before sending it, but it still felt strange, personal, out of character. She didn't usually concern herself with the names behind the small garages on her acquisition list. People were numbers. Properties were leverage. Efficiency over empathy, that was the Hartman way. But something about Jack Miller refused to be reduced to a spreadsheet. Across the desk, her assistant, Mara, tapped quickly on a tablet, already compiling public records, license registrations, even a Yelp review or two. She glanced up, eyes sharp but curious. "Want me to run a background check?" Natalie hesitated, then shook her head. "No, nothing invasive, just give me a sense of him. Who he is, what kind of shop he runs, anything that might help." Mara raised a brow. "You don't usually go soft for these guys." Natalie gave a tight smile. "I'm not going soft. I'm just making sure we're not about to bulldoze a school or a war memorial or something." Mara nodded, clearly unconvinced, but too smart to press. "I'll keep it discreet." As her assistant returned to her screen, Natalie turned toward the window again, arms folded tightly across her chest. The city buzzed below, detached and sterile, but her thoughts kept slipping back to that frozen morning. Jack hadn't known her, hadn't asked. And yet, he'd stopped, fixed her tire, smiled at her daughter like she was the most important thing in his world. And when she tried to pay him, he just said, "Pay it forward." Who does that anymore? She'd grown used to people who smiled because they wanted something. Clients, investors, even so-called friends. But Jack's kindness had felt genuine, disarming. Like he hadn't learned the game or refused to play it. Natalie sighed and looked down at her desk, where the acquisition packet for Miller's Garage still sat unopened. Her name was stamped in gold across the cover. Hartman Auto Group. Expansion Strategy Q2 Targets. She flipped it shut and shoved it aside. This wasn't just business anymore. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't sure if that was a problem or the beginning of something better. The air inside Miller's Garage was thick with the smell of oil, rust, and stubborn hope. Jack stood under the hood of a '99 pickup that had seen better decades, wrench in hand, sweat beading beneath his collar despite the winter chill seeping through the drafty walls. Outside, snow flurries floated down lazily, coating the gravel lot like powdered sugar. Inside, the silence was louder than usual. No customers, no ringing phone. Just the occasional hiss of steam and the creak of aging equipment. He tightened the last bolt and stepped back, wiping his hands on a frayed rag. The repair was solid, but the job? It wouldn't cover much. Not the heating bill, not Lily's school shoes, definitely not the back rent on the building he'd once hoped to buy outright. He glanced toward the desk in the corner paperwork, piled like a slow-moving avalanche. Bills, late notices, polite threats dressed up as form letters from Hartman Auto Group's regional office. They'd been circling for months now, first with a soft offer to absorb his business. Then with a firmer one. The last envelope was unopened, face down. Jack knew what it said without reading it. Hartman had already bought out the neighboring shops in Pine Ridge and Eldon Grove. One by one, they were replacing real mechanics with clean uniforms and scripted customer service. Places like his where the work mattered more than the margins were disappearing. He walked to the front window and looked out at the street, quiet as ever, no one coming. Not yet. The shop had been his father's once. It had grease in the floorboards and history in the walls. People used to drop by just to chat, to bring coffee, to shoot the breeze while their cars got patched up. Now, they went where the coupons were, where the signage was newer, where loyalty meant less than a $10 discount. The bell above the front door jingled. Jack turned, half hoping, half dreading. But it was just the mailman. Jack nodded a silent greeting and accepted the stack of envelopes. More red print. More reminders that he was running out of road. He set the mail on the desk, took a deep breath, and went back to work. Because that's what you do when everything's falling apart. You fix what you can and hope the rest holds together just a little bit longer. The living room floor was scattered with markers, crayons, and scraps of paper, each one bearing some version of a flower, a car, or a crooked smiley face. Lily sat cross-legged in the middle of it all, tongue poking out in concentration as she carefully added the final touches to her masterpiece. "Don't forget the heart on the I," Jack said from the couch, sipping his third cup of lukewarm coffee. "I know, Dad," she replied with practiced exasperation. "It's my signature," he smiled, watching her draw a bold pink heart above the letter. The picture was simple but sweet, a cartoon version of him in his coveralls next to a smiling woman with long dark hair and big round sunglasses. Behind them, a wonky white SUV and a little stick figure Lily holding a sign that said, "Thank you." When she finished, she held it up triumphantly. "Do you think she'll like it?" Jack set down his mug. "I think she'll love it." Lily beamed. "Good. Because I already put her card in my backpack so we can send it tomorrow." Jack raised a brow. "Wait, what?" She scrambled to her school bag and pulled out the sleek business card, proudly unfolding the picture and holding them side by side. "We have her name and everything. She helped us, and she was nice to you. You said people don't do that for no reason anymore. So I want to say thank you," Jack chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "You've been listening too much again." "You talk loud when you think no one's around," she said matter-of-factly. He shook his head, equal parts amused and caught off guard. All right. If you want to send it, we can send it. But don't expect a reply, Bug. People like her, they're busy." "She wasn't too busy to stop and talk," Lily said, already folding the picture neatly. She smiled with her eyes, too. That means it was real. Jack didn't argue. There wasn't much you could say when your 7-year-old daughter was wiser than you were. The next morning, they dropped the envelope into the blue mailbox by the school. No postage, just the business card clipped inside with Lily's best drawing and her careful handwriting. "To Miss Claire. Thank you for being nice to my dad. Love, Lily." The town sign for Briarwood appeared like a ghost through the windshield, its white letters dusted with frost, standing against a backdrop of snow-dusted pines. Natalie eased off the gas, her rental SUV humming quietly down the empty road as the landscape slowly shifted from city-worn chaos to small-town stillness. She hadn't planned on coming back so soon, not officially. Anyway, the calendar in her office back in Chicago said, "Market Field Research," with a vague itinerary and a return flight no one would question. But the real reason for the detour sat quietly in her chest like a weight she couldn't shake. Jack. She'd replayed that morning on the side of the road more times than she could count. The way he'd spoken to her without pretense, the way he'd looked right at her, not through her. It wasn't just the kindness, it was the honesty, the rarity of it. And then there was the drawing. Natalie reached for her bag and pulled it out again, folded neatly, tucked behind her tablet. A crayon version of her and Jack's smile lopsided, his shoulders broad and warm even in cartoon form. The little girl's handwriting scrawled across the top still made her heart pull every time she read it. "Thank you for being nice to my dad. Love, Lily." She hadn't known what to do when the letter arrived. No return address. Just a gesture so pure it had stopped her mid-meeting. She'd excused herself, sat in the stairwell of the corporate office tower, and stared at the note for 20 minutes like it was a map to somewhere she'd forgotten how to get to. Now, here she was, pulling into Briarwood again under cloudy skies and excuses. She told herself she'd check on the market climate, gauge the acquisition climate, maybe drop by the shop casually, professionally, but in her heart, she knew that wasn't true. This wasn't about business. It was about the mechanic who hadn't asked for a thing. About a little girl with big eyes and honest words. About something real in a life that had gotten too polished to touch. She parked near the old coffee shop on Main, engine idling. Natalie Hartman had spent a decade building an empire. But for the first time in years, she was chasing something she couldn't put in a report. She was chasing him. The clank of metal echoed through the garage as Jack leaned under the hood of a dusty Corolla. Sleeves rolled to his elbows, engine grease streaked across his forearm. It was another slow day, no appointments, just walk-ins and whatever rolled in from word of mouth. Briarwood had quiet rhythms like that, and Jack had learned to live with the lull. He was elbow-deep in the engine when the shop door creaked open. "Be right with you," he called without looking up, tightening a bolt. Footsteps approached, confident, deliberate, not the hesitant shuffle of someone in car trouble. Jack straightened, wiping his hands on a rag, and froze. There she was, Claire. Only she wasn't bundled in roadside layers or shivering in the cold. Today, she wore a tailored charcoal coat, soft leather gloves, and boots that probably cost more than the set of tires he'd installed last week. She looked polished, elegant and completely out of place. "Hi," she said, offering a small smile. "Hope I'm not interrupting." Jack blinked, caught between recognition and confusion. "You again." "Guilty." She held out a cream-colored envelope. "I wanted to return something." He took it, brow furrowed. Inside was Lily's drawing, carefully unfolded, preserved. "You came all the way back for this?" "Well, that, and I figured you deserved a thank you in person," she said. "Properly. I didn't get a chance to say it last time." Jack eyed her, wary. "Most people would have sent a card." She smiled, a little sheepish. "Cards are easy to ignore." There was something in her tone like she wasn't just talking about the picture. Jack folded it carefully and set it on the workbench. He didn't offer her a seat, not yet. "So, what's the real reason you're here?" "Clareno." Natalie hesitated, just a flicker. Then she recovered, her smile soft but steady. "Honestly, I'm not sure yet. I just knew I didn't want to forget the way your daughter looked when she said you were the best at fixing cars. That disarmed him more than it should have." He shifted, uncomfortable. "You're not from around here." "No," she said. "But maybe I needed to be, even just for a bit." Jack crossed his arms, still watching her carefully. "People don't just drop into Briarwood for no reason." Natalie met his gaze. "Maybe I'm trying to remember mine." And Jack, suspicious as ever, didn't say what he was really thinking. Neither do they usually come back. The sun dipped low over Briarwood, washing the shop windows in a warm gold glow as Jack slid the garage doors closed for the evening. He was already thinking about dinner, what he could throw together that didn't come from a box, when Lily came barreling toward him from the side office, breathless with excitement. "Dad? Dad, she's still here." Jack turned just as Natalie stepped out from around the corner, brushing snow from her coat. She'd lingered longer than he expected, claiming she wanted to see how things worked in a real garage. She'd asked a few polite questions, stayed quiet while he worked. Even handed him a wrench once without being asked. Lily stood between them, grinning. "I asked her if she wanted to come to dinner." Jack blinked. "You what?" "I invited her," Lily said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "We're having spaghetti. You said it's better when we have company." Jack looked at Natalie, who lifted her hands innocently. "She's persuasive." He hesitated. Hosting a dinner, especially for someone like her, wasn't something he'd planned. And yet, Lily was beaming. Natalie didn't look like she was pitying them. If anything, she seemed hopeful. He sighed. "You like spaghetti, Claire?" "I love spaghetti," she said, with the faintest spark in her eyes. Jack shook his head with a reluctant smile. "All right, one meal." Lily cheered and grabbed Natalie's hand like they were old friends, already chattering about her favorite cartoons and how she liked extra cheese on her garlic bread. Natalie looked at Jack as Lily pulled her toward the truck. "You sure?" "Nope," he said, locking the shop behind them. "But it's too late now." They drove the short distance home, Jack quietly watching Natalie from the corner of his eye as she listened intently to Lily's stories. Something about the way she responded with real interest, not forced politeness, made Jack's unease crack, just a little. When they pulled into the driveway, Natalie stepped out into the cold, her breath catching at the modest little house with the crooked porch light and the smoke curling from the chimney. It wasn't luxury. It wasn't what she was used to. but something about it felt more like home than anything she'd had in years. The kitchen was small, a little too warm, and smelled like comfort slow-cooked chili bubbling on the stove, fresh cornbread cooling on a chipped ceramic plate, and the faintest trace of cinnamon from an old candle Lily insisted on lighting for guests. Natalie sat at the worn wooden table, her coat hung neatly by the door, watching Jack move through the kitchen with quiet efficiency. "This isn't spaghetti," she said with a teasing smile. Jack glanced over his shoulder. It was either chili or boxed mac and cheese. Figured this one had more dignity. "I approve," she said, folding her hands in her lap. "Though I'm a fan of boxed mac." "That's a dangerous confession in this house," he muttered. Lily piped up from the opposite side of the table, still coloring with her ever-growing pile of crayons. "He burns it sometimes. He says it builds character." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Says the kid who eats marshmallows with ketchup." Natalie choked on a laugh. "You what?" "Only once." Lily grinned, clearly proud. "It was an experiment." "Well," Natalie said, biting back a grin, "I admire your courage." Dinner was simple hearty bowls of chili, slices of cornbread thick with butter, and glasses of sweet tea. But Natalie couldn't remember the last time a meal felt this full, not just of food, but of something else, something warmer. Jack served her without ceremony. No small talk about restaurants or wine pairings, just a quiet, "Let me know if it's too spicy." It wasn't. It was perfect. Conversation flowed easier than she expected. Lily did most of the talking, stories about school, her drawing contest, how she thought her dad was secretly a superhero. Jack mostly listened, throwing in dry, deadpan one-liners that had Natalie laughing more than she had in months. She found herself leaning in, smiling too easily, forgetting, even briefly, who she was supposed to be. After the dishes were cleared and Lily was tucked in with a sleepy, "Can Miss Claire come again?" Natalie stood by the door, her coat in her hands, uncertain. Jack gave a quiet nod. "Thanks for coming. Thanks for letting me," she said softly. "It was nice. Really nice." Jack shrugged, but there was something softer in his eyes now. "Don't get used to it." "I might," she replied, stepping out into the cold night air, her heart just a little warmer than when she arrived. The morning after dinner felt different. Natalie sat alone in her hotel room, a cup of coffee cooling in her hand, her thoughts lingering somewhere between Lily's laughter and the way Jack had looked at her, guarded, but not unkind. The room around her was sleek and sterile, all soft neutrals and brushed chrome. Comfortable, but soulless. A sharp ping broke the silence. Her phone lit up on the nightstand, vibrating once. Board call, 5 minutes. Agenda: Briarwood acquisition approval. She sighed, setting the mug down untouched. Moments later, her laptop flickered to life, and a grid of well-dressed, expressionless faces filled the screen. The board members wasted no time. "Natalie," one of them began, "we've reviewed the terms again. Briarwood is the last remaining holdout in that corridor. Once Miller's garage is secured, we'll have full market penetration in that region." Another voice chimed in, clipped and impatient. "You've had the file for over a month. What's the delay?" Natalie's jaw tightened. "There are community concerns, sentiment around the family business. We don't trade in sentiment," a third cut in. "We trade in dominance. Jack Miller's shop is outdated, underperforming, and clinging to a nostalgic business model that doesn't scale. We offer him a lifeline. If he refuses, we proceed with standard acquisition and rebuild." She nodded stiffly. Understood. But it didn't sit right. Not after sitting at his kitchen table. Not after watching Lily offer her cornbread like it was treasure, or the way Jack had quietly given her the best piece of the pie without saying a word. He wasn't clinging to the past. He was protecting something real. Something rare. The meeting ended with a firm directive. Finalize the acquisition within the next 10 days. No more delays. When the screen went black, Natalie sat still for a long moment. Then she stood, moved to the window, and looked out over the quiet town below. Briarwood, with its weathered storefronts and handwritten chalk signs, where people still waved from porches and little girls drew thank-you notes in crayon. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from her assistant. "Need me to send the legal draft to Miller?" Natalie typed her reply with steady fingers. "Not yet," then added, "and don't mention my visit. He doesn't know who I am." She locked her phone, slipped it into her purse, and headed for the door wearing the same soft smile she'd worn the night before. But now, behind it, the weight of a choice she wasn't ready to make. Natalie told herself she was staying a few more days for research. Market immersion, community insight, brand sensitivity, whatever corporate term, sounded just plausible enough to silence her conscience and keep the board off her back. But deep down, she knew the truth. It wasn't about the data, it was about him. Each morning, she found a reason to linger in Briarwood just a little longer. A coffee from the tiny corner shop with mismatched mugs. A walk through the town square, where old men played chess and talked like every minute mattered. A stop at the hardware store that still used a handwritten receipt pad. There was no pretense here, no curated charm, just life, unfolding at its own pace. And then there was Jack. Rough around the edges, steady hands, quiet eyes. The kind of man who didn't talk just to fill silence. He wasn't trying to impress her. In fact, most of the time, he barely seemed to acknowledge she was anything more than someone who showed up uninvited and didn't know her way around a carburetor. She liked that about him. He worked without showmanship, sleeves rolled, jaw set, every movement efficient and sure. When he did speak, it was simple, sometimes dryly funny, always honest. She watched how the townspeople respected him, how they trusted him not because he demanded it, but because he earned it. And Lily. Lily was a force of her own. That little girl had a way of wrapping people around her finger without ever trying. One minute she was teaching Natalie how to braid yarn dolls. The next, she was handing her a sticky drawing labeled, "Best Friend I Just Met." It made Natalie's chest ache in a way she hadn't expected. She started helping out at the garage in small ways, organizing receipts, answering the old landline, bringing lunch when Jack was too busy to stop. It wasn't glamorous, but it grounded her, reminded her of something she hadn't felt in years, belonging. Jack never asked why she was still around. Maybe he didn't want to know. Maybe he already did. Either way, Natalie wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. Maybe not at all. The snow came in fast. By mid-morning, Briarwood was blanketed in white. Thick, heavy flakes drifted down like feathers, muffling the town until even the usual hum of passing trucks and distant train whistles fell silent. Jack stood at the garage door, arms crossed, watching the world slow to a crawl. "Well," he muttered, "there goes the delivery." Behind him, Natalie rubbed her gloved hands together, breath visible in the freezing air. She hadn't planned on staying long, just dropping off lunch and maybe a few parts she'd picked up from the supply store, but when the snow started sticking and the plows didn't come, plans shifted. Lily peeked out from the office, her eyes wide with excitement. "School's closed. They sent an email." Jack glanced at Natalie, then at the thickening snowfall. "Looks like you're stuck." She smiled, brushing a few snowflakes from her coat. "Could be worse." They spent the morning in the garage, working side by side. Natalie wasn't a natural, but she was quick. She asked questions, listened, handed Jack tools with surprising precision. He didn't say much, but every so often, she'd catch him watching Harry's eyes softer than usual. When the power flickered and the space grew too cold for comfort, Jack set down his wrench. "We're calling it. No one's driving in this mess." Lily didn't wait for an invitation. She bundled into her puffy coat, mittens and boots like a tiny avalanche in motion. "Snowball fight," she shouted, dashing out the side door. Jack rolled his eyes but followed, tugging on his coat. Natalie hesitated a moment, then laughed and ran after them. Outside, the snow was untouched, pristine, and thick enough to swallow their footprints. Lily dove in first, scooping snow by the handful, already giggling. Jack lobbed a gentle snowball over her head. It missed by a mile. Natalie scooped one of her own and tossed it at Jack's back. Direct hit. He turned slowly. You sure you want to start that? What? Afraid of a little competition? She grinned. They battled until their cheeks were pink and breathless laughter echoed down the street. Jack finally called a truce, dropping back into the snow beside Natalie while Lily built a lopsided snowman a few feet away. For a long moment, the world was still. Natalie lay back, staring at the gray sky, snowflakes catching in her lashes. You don't get days like this in the city, she whispered. Jack looked over at her. No, you don't. And right then, neither of them wanted to be anywhere else. The snow was still falling when Natalie returned to her hotel, cheeks flushed and boots soaked through. She dropped her gloves on the nightstand, kicked off her boots, and sank onto the edge of the bed, heart still warm from the daylilies' laughter, Jack's rare but real smile, the simple joy of a snowball fight that felt like something out of a memory she never actually had. Her phone buzzed against the side table, screen lighting up with a name she couldn't ignore. Mara. Natalie hesitated, then answered. Hey. Finally, Mara said, voice clipped. I've been calling you all day. Yeah, sorry. Storm hit hard. Roads are a mess. Well, brace yourself, because this might be worse. Natalie sat up straighter. What is it? You're officially behind schedule on the Briarwood acquisition. The board's watching closely. Rumor is they think you're stalling. And considering pulling the proposal out of your hands entirely. Natalie closed her eyes. They don't even know the town. They've never set foot in that garage. They don't care. All they see is delay, and delay looks like weakness. You either push this through, or someone else will. And if it gets reassigned, you'll be lucky to keep your seat at the table. Natalie rubbed her temple, tension rising like a tide. It's not just some rundown shop, Mara. Jack's built a life there. People trust him. You're not wrong, Mara said more gently. But you don't get to be the CEO of a company like Hartman by making emotional exceptions. Silence stretched between them. You've done more for this company than anyone, Mara added. But if the board thinks you're compromised, they'll move fast. You know how this works. I know, Natalie murmured, voice low. After the call ended, she sat still for a long time, the wind howling softly outside the window. Somewhere down the road, Jack and Lily were probably eating dinner, maybe reading a bedtime story, completely unaware of the ticking clock Natalie was up against. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass of the window, polished, composed, everything she'd worked so hard to become. And, for the first time, she wasn't sure if she still recognized the woman looking back. The snow had stopped by morning, leaving behind a quiet, white world softened at the edges. Jack arrived at the garage early, shovel in hand, clearing the front walk in slow, practiced strokes. The town was still waking up, rooftops sparkling in the pale winter sun, and the air held that rare kind of stillness that only came after a storm. Inside, the office was just beginning to warm. The heater rattled to life as Jack tossed off his gloves and dusted the snow from his boots. He poured himself a cup of bitter black coffee and sat down at the desk, flipping through the pile of mail that had come in late the night before. Junk, coupons, a gas bill he didn't want to open. And then something odd. Folded neatly among the clutter was an old issue of Midwest Business Weekly. Yellowed at the edges, the glossy cover featured a photo of a woman standing in front of a sleek black car, sunglasses perched on her head, arms crossed with practiced poise. The headline read, Natalie Hartman, Queen of the Auto Industry. Jack's breath stilled. It was her. No question. Same jawline, same confident tilt of the head. But in the photo, she wasn't the woman who laughed over chili in his kitchen or made snow angels in the yard with Lily. This version was sharper, harder, polished like chrome. He turned the page, scanning quickly. Daughter of late auto magnate Charles Hartman, Natalie took the reins of Hartman Auto Group at just 29. Known for her aggressive expansion strategies and ironclad negotiations, she's turned the company into one of the nation's fastest-growing auto chain soften at the expense of small-town family garages. Jack didn't read the rest. He set the magazine down, slow and careful, like it might burn through the desk. Natalie. Not Claire. Not just a kind stranger with a flat tire. She hadn't just been visiting. She'd known. Jack leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. Anger sparked beneath his ribs, hot and slow. Not because she was powerful, not because she was successful, because she hadn't told him, because he'd let her in, let her near Lily. Near him. And now the pieces were clicking into place, and none of them felt like the truth she'd shown him. Natalie wasn't expecting him. She was just stepping out of the bakery on Main, arms full of fresh bread and pastries Lily liked, when she spotted Jack across the street. He was walking fast, shoulders squared, jaw set tight. Her smile faltered before it ever made it to her face. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just crossed the road like a man with something to say. "Jack?" she called gently, sensing the shift before he spoke. He stopped a few feet from her, eyes hard. The same eyes that had once looked at her like she was someone worth knowing now felt distant. Cold. "I know who you are," he said, voice low. The words hit like a slap. Natalie stood still, a breeze tugging at her coat, her arms tightening around the paper bag in her hands. "I found the article," he went on. "Natalie Hartman, queen of the auto industry. Hell of a nickname," she swallowed. "I was going to tell you." "When?" he cut in. "Before or after your company takes my garage and guts it for parts?" "I never meant to," she started, but he raised a hand, silencing her. "Don't," he said. "Don't pretend this was all some coincidence. You came here with a purpose. You watched me work. Ate at my table. Let my daughter draw you pictures." "I didn't know it would happen like this," she said quietly. "I came here for business, yes, but it changed. You changed it." Jack shook his head, laughing without humor. "You think saying that makes it better?" "No," she whispered. "But it's the truth." He looked away, the muscle in his jaw twitching. "I let you in. Not because of who you are, because of who I thought you were. Claire. Just Claire." "I wanted to be her," she said, voice trembling. "I wanted to be the version of myself that didn't have to wear a title or lead with power. I didn't lie to hurt you. I just didn't know how to stop pretending." Jack stared at her for a long beat. And when he finally spoke, it was quiet, and it cut clean. "You should have told me before you let my kid call you her friend." Then he turned, hands in his pockets, and walked away down the snow-lined street, leaving Natalie standing on the curb, arms full, heart suddenly and completely empty. The town felt quieter without her. Jack noticed it in strange places. The bell above the garage door didn't ring mid-morning anymore. How no one brought him coffee without asking how he took it. The bench outside the shop sat untouched, a thin sheet of snow gathering on its slats. And Lily. Lily noticed too. She asked the first time over breakfast, spooning cereal into her mouth with sleepy eyes. "Is Miss Natalie busy?" Jack didn't look up from his mug. "Guess so." The second time came 2 days later, as they drove past the corner bakery. Maybe she had to go back to her city, right? For important work? "Probably," Jack muttered, his hands tightening on the wheel. By the third time she stopped asking with hope in her voice. "She's not coming back, huh?" Jack glanced at her in the rearview mirror, and for a moment he saw his own disappointment reflected in her small, scrunched face. "She had things to do," he said. "People like her don't usually stick around towns like this." Lily didn't say anything. She just turned to look out the window. Back at the garage, Jack buried himself in work. Oil changes, brake pads, anything to keep his hands busy and his thoughts quieter. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stop checking his phone. Not because he was waiting, because he was trying not to. Her name had been there 3 times now. Once the night she left. Again the next morning. Then, 3 days ago, just after closing. "Jack, please, just talk to me. Let me explain." He hadn't replied. He couldn't. It wasn't just that she lied. It was what it meant. The garage wasn't just a business, it was his father's legacy, his daughter's future, his life, and she'd walked into it knowing full well she held the power to tear it all down. Worse, she let him believe she didn't. He tucked his phone deeper into his coat pocket and went back to work, wrench in hand, jaw set. The silence between them wasn't loud, it was deliberate. The conference room at Hartman Auto Group's downtown headquarters felt colder than usual. Natalie sat at the head of the long glass table, shoulders squared, hair pulled back tight, the skyline a silent witness through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her. Around her, the board members shuffled papers, adjusted cuffs, glanced at one another with the rehearsed detachment of seasoned executives. "Let's get to it," said Richard Doyle, the board chair. His voice clipped. "Natalie, we've delayed the Briarwood acquisition twice now. We need to move forward. The window for a clean takeover is closing." Natalie didn't flinch. "I'm aware of the timeline." "Then what's the holdup?" a woman to her right asked. "We've acquired every other property in that corridor. That garage is the final link." Another added, "We've already drafted the offer. It's generous. Frankly, more than the property's worth." Natalie's hands were clasped in front of her, fingers still. "I'm not signing off." The room stilled. "I beg your pardon?" Doyle asked. "I'm not greenlighting the acquisition," she repeated calmly. "I'm pulling Briarwood from the Q2 strategy." A stunned silence followed. Richard leaned forward. "Natalie, this isn't just a property. This is market control. You built this expansion plan. What's changed?" Her jaw tightened. "Maybe I finally started asking what it's costing us to keep winning." Murmurs rose around the table. A few exchanged glances. A younger board member cleared his throat. "Are we seriously jeopardizing an entire growth model for some mom-and-pop garage?" Natalie stood. "It's not just a garage, it's a man's livelihood, a family legacy. The kind of place we used to respect before we got so focused on margins and market share that we forgot what made us different." "Are you emotionally compromised?" someone asked. She didn't blink. "I'm human." "And what do you expect us to tell shareholders?" Doyle demanded. "That we backed down because our CEO had a change of heart?" Natalie stared down the table. "Tell them we remembered that people matter more than property lines." Another silence. Longer this time. Heavier. Doyle sat back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "This is going to cost you, Natalie." "I know," she said, and she did. Her position, her leverage. Maybe her future here. But for the first time in years, she walked out of that boardroom feeling like herself. No title, no mask. Just Natalie. And that had to be enough. The envelope arrived in the afternoon mail, no return address. Just Jack's name written in clean, careful handwriting across the front. It sat untouched on the workbench for hours, half buried beneath a stack of parts invoices and oil-streaked paperwork. Jack saw it. More than once. But he didn't touch it. Not at first. It wasn't until Lily was asleep, the garage closed and the world gone still, that he finally opened it. Inside was a single sheet of thick stationery. No company logo. No formal header. Just her handwriting, elegant, steady, and, somehow, a little unsure. "Jack, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, and maybe you've already tossed this in the trash. I wouldn't blame you if you did. But if by some chance you're reading, I want you to know the truth. Not the polished version, not the corporate script, but the real story. I came to Briarwood with one purpose. To acquire your garage. Another dot on the map. Another easy win for the company. I'd done it 100 times before. Then my tire blew out. Then you. You didn't know who I was, and you helped me anyway. No ego, no angle, just honesty. I hadn't seen that in a long time, and I didn't realize how badly I needed it. I should have told you who I was. Every day I didn't, it got harder, because the lie became something I never wanted between us. But I knew the moment I said it out loud, I'd lose whatever real thing was growing between us. I let fear win. I let silence do the damage. That's on me. You once told me people don't stop just to help anymore. That maybe kindness isn't free like it used to be. You're wrong, Jack. Yours was. And it changed me. I turned down the acquisition, told the board no. They weren't happy, but for once, I didn't care. Because I couldn't take something from someone who had already given me more than he knew. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know you mattered. That what you built is worth more than they'll ever see on paper. You don't owe me anything. But if you ever wanted to talk, I'd listen. No titles, no offers, just me. Natalie Jack read the letter twice, then once more. Slower. And for the first time in days, he let himself feel the weight of what might have been and what still could be. The letter sat on the workbench for 3 days. Jack had folded it back into its envelope, slid it between the pages of the shop ledger like it was something he didn't want to lose but couldn't bear to look at again. And yet every time the garage got quiet. Every time Lily wasn't around to fill the air with chatter or music, his eyes drifted toward that ledger. On the 4th morning, before the sun had fully cleared the rooftops, he poured his coffee, unlocked the shop, and pulled the letter out again. This time, he didn't skim. He read every word, slowly. Let them settle. There was something about seeing her words not spoken, not slick or defensive or polished, but written. Like she'd taken her time, like she meant them. No excuses. No spin, just truth. It chipped at the wall he'd built around himself. Not all at once, but enough to let something through something he didn't want to name just yet. He remembered the way she'd looked at Lily like she saw her, really saw her. The way she'd shoveled snow without hesitation. The way her laugh sounded in his kitchen, warm and unguarded. It hadn't been fake. None of it had. That was the part that stuck. Because he wanted to hate her, he did. For the lie. For what her company represented. For the choice she almost made. But the truth was, she didn't make it. She walked away. For him. For the garage. Maybe for herself, too. Jack folded the letter again, tighter this time, like he needed to feel the weight of it in his palm. He stared at the closed garage doors, at the frost painting the edges of the glass, at the empty lot outside. She wasn't here. But she hadn't really left either. He slid the letter into his coat pocket and grabbed his keys. Maybe it was time to fix something other than engines. Maybe it was time to start with what was broken in him. The Briarwood Library was quiet, in that comforting, timeless way, pages turning softly. The occasional creak of a wooden chair, the hum of the old heater struggling to keep the place warm. Natalie had ducked inside mostly to escape the cold and the noise in her own head. She hadn't expected to stay long, let alone see her again. But there she was, Lily Miller, perched cross-legged on the carpet in the children's corner, a stack of books surrounding her like a fortress. Her hair was in a messy ponytail, her cheeks pink from the cold, and she was deep in a picture book about raccoons with superpowers. Natalie froze. She hadn't seen Lily since before. Since the truth came out, since she left. But Lily looked up at that exact moment and broke into a smile so wide it made Natalie's chest ache. "Miss Claire!" Natalie blinked, stunned by the sound of the name she hadn't heard in weeks. Lily scrambled to her feet, book forgotten, and ran over without hesitation. "You came back!" Natalie crouched to meet her, heart thudding. "Hi, Lily. I wasn't sure you'd remember me." Lily giggled. "You're hard to forget." Natalie laughed softly, but it was tight at the edges. "How are you?" "Good. Dad's good too. He fixed a Mustang this week. It was very loud." "I'm glad," Natalie said. "I've missed you." Lily tilted her head. "So why didn't you come back sooner?" Natalie didn't know how to answer that. She looked away, suddenly very interested in the cracked tile under her boots. "It's okay," Lily said, voice softer now. "I know grown-ups get scared sometimes." Natalie's eyes shot back to hers. "Do they?" "Yeah," Lily said seriously. "My dad does. He tries to hide it, but I hear him sometimes when he thinks I'm not listening." Natalie felt her breath catch. Lily went on, as if sharing a secret. "He still talks about you, you know." When he thinks I'm asleep. He keeps your letter in his coat pocket. Natalie swallowed hard. I think he misses you, Lily said simply, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. He just doesn't know how to say it yet. And before Natalie could find the words she needed, Lily smiled again and added, but he's really good at fixing things. Natalie blinked back the sudden sting behind her eyes. Maybe he's not the only one. The engine coughed once, then again, then died with a pitiful sputter and a sharp clunk that made Jack's stomach sink. He coasted to the shoulder of the empty 2-lane road, gravel crunching under the tires of his aging work truck, and shifted into park with a resigned sigh. Steam curled out from beneath the hood like a ghost escaping, and the familiar scent of burnt oil drifted in through the vents. Jack muttered a curse under his breath. He popped the hood and stepped out, cold wind whipping against his jacket. Under the rusted metal, he saw exactly what he feared. The belt had snapped clean off, and judging by the mess, it had taken part of the water pump with it. No patch job. No quick fix. He pulled out his phone and stared at the screen. No bars. Of course. He was halfway between Briarwood and nowhere, with nothing but farmland and trees in every direction. He checked the glove box for tools, out of habit more than hope. Nothing useful. Just a flashlight, a crumpled granola bar, and a pair of Lily's old sunglasses. Jack leaned against the side of the truck, arms folded, breath fogging the air. The irony wasn't lost on him. Mechanic stuck on the side of the road with a busted truck. After a few minutes, headlights appeared in the distance. He stood straighter, squinting as the vehicle drew closer. A van. White. Clean. The Hartman Auto Group logo came into view on the side just before it pulled over in front of him. Jack let out a slow, dry breath. You've got to be kidding me. The driver stepped out, a young guy in a branded winter jacket and beanie, clipboard in hand. Need a lift? He asked cheerfully. Jack hesitated. Everything in him resisted the idea, but the cold was biting, and he wasn't walking 10 miles in boots this worn. Yeah, he said finally. Looks like I don't have much of a choice. He climbed into the passenger seat, the heater blasting his frozen hands. Where are you headed? The driver asked. Jack stared out the window, jaw tight. Wherever I can get this thing fixed, he muttered. Even if it meant walking into the belly of the beast, the Hartman Auto branch in Maple Ridge was sleek, efficient, and soulless, the kind of place that smelled more like air freshener and printer toner than oil or grit. Jack sat in the waiting area, arms crossed, flanked by glossy brochures and flat-screen TVs playing muted ads about total car care and modern mechanical solutions. It all made his skin itch. The kid who drove him in had taken the truck around back and vanished. Jack hadn't expected much. Maybe a junior tech would look it over. Maybe they'd overquote him just for sport. He was already working on what parts he could salvage when he heard a voice. Thought it looked familiar. Jack looked up sharply. Natalie stood in the service bay doorway, sleeves rolled, hair pulled back, a smudge of grease on her wrist like she'd earned it. No clipboard, no heels, just her. For a long second, neither of them moved. You're doing hands-on work now? He asked, voice low. She shrugged. Someone said it builds character. Jack didn't smile. Not yet. But something in his expression cracked, just slightly. I heard about the breakdown, she said. Called the branch when I saw the tow alert. Figured if you were going to end up here, I should be the one to face it. He stood slowly. Didn't know CEOs got under hoods. I didn't, for a long time, she said. But I've been learning. It helps, knowing what I'm asking people to give up. Jack held her gaze. You're not here to finish what you started? No, she said, stepping closer. I'm here to fix what I broke. He didn't answer. She turned and nodded toward the service bay. Come on. I pulled the part you'll need. Might be easier if we work on it together. He followed, silent but curious. Tools clinked softly as they worked side by side beneath the fluorescent lights. No small talk, no grand speeches, just the sound of metal and breath and something tentative building between them again. At one point, she handed him a wrench without being asked. Their fingers brushed. He didn't pull away. And when the engine finally turned over again, the sound wasn't just relief, it was something else. Like maybe not everything between them was broken. The sun was dipping low when Natalie pulled into the gravel lot outside Miller's garage, headlights sweeping over the weathered siding and hand-painted sign. The last of the snow had melted into muddy patches, and the scent of oil and pine lingered in the chilled evening air. Jack was locking up, rolling down the garage bay door with a metallic rattle, when he saw her step out of her car. He paused, keys in hand, eyes steady. "No truck trouble this time," she said softly. "Then what brings you here?" His voice wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. Natalie took a breath. "The truth. No pitch, no papers, just me." He didn't respond, but he didn't walk away either. She stepped closer, arms crossed, not defensive, but like she was holding herself together. "I owed you more than a letter." "You owed me honesty," Jack said. "I know," she said quietly. "And I didn't give it to you, not when it mattered." Jack leaned against the side of the building, the last of the sunlight, casting shadows across his face. "Why didn't you?" Natalie looked down, then back up, her voice steadier than she felt. "Because the minute I told you who I was, everything would have changed. I didn't want to be Natalie Hartman, CEO of the company that's been swallowing up your world. I just wanted to be the woman with a flat tire who couldn't stop thinking about the man who helped her anyway." He said nothing, but she saw the flicker in his eyes. She went on. "I told the board no. I walked away from the deal, from what they wanted. Not to win you over, but because I finally saw what they couldn't. That places like this matter. That people like you matter." Jack looked at her for a long time, like he was trying to find the catch, the loophole, the spin. "There's nothing I want from you," Natalie added. "Not forgiveness. Not a second chance. I just needed you to know I see you now for everything you are." The quiet between them stretched. And then Jack gave a small nod. Not agreement. Not quite acceptance. But something real. "You want some coffee?" he asked, jerking his head toward the garage office. Natalie smiled, something fragile and hopeful flickering across her face. "I'd love some." And just like that, the door opened again, this time without lies between them. Natalie hadn't meant to open the box. It had been sitting in her storage unit for years, sealed and dusty, tucked between outdated promotional banners and awards she never bothered to display. She found it while searching for old blueprints on, unmarked, battered cardboard thing, heavy with time. Curiosity, or maybe something closer to ache, made her lift the lid. Inside, on top of a faded Polaroid of her, as a little girl in overalls beside a rusted truck, was a leather-bound journal. Her father's. She sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, fingers tracing the worn edges of the cover. Charles Hartman had been larger-than-life visionary, builder, relentless. The world knew him as the man who revolutionized car care. But Natalie had known another version. The dad who brought her to work on weekends, who taught her to respect machines, not because of what they were worth, but because of who they served. She opened the journal. The handwriting was unmistakably his, bold, slanted, always a little too fast. Notes filled the margins, scribbled thoughts alongside sketches of tools and half-drawn diagrams. And then, partway through, a passage stopped her cold. "The big guys will always chase the dollar. Let them. What matters is that someone's out there fixing cars at midnight so a single mom can get to work in the morning. That's who we're building for. Not the board, not the stockholders. The people." Natalie's throat tightened. She flipped to the back of the journal, where her father had taped a yellowing photo of the first Hartman Chopra humble garage, barely more than a shed. On the back, in faded ink, "Start small. Stay human." She sat there a long while, the journal resting in her lap, heart heavy but clear. Somewhere along the way, she'd traded that mission for market share, swapped integrity for metrics. She thought growth was the goal until a man in a flannel shirt and a grease-stained cap reminded her what her father already knew. It had never been about the empire. It was about people, and maybe just maybe it wasn't too late to build something better. The classroom smelled faintly of glue sticks, dry erase markers, and peanut butter sandwiches. Paper cutouts of planets and stick figure drawings of firemen and astronauts decorated the walls. A cardboard banner above the chalkboard read, "Career Day, ask me what I do," in crooked, colorful letters. Natalie sat quietly in the back row of tiny chairs, knees pressed awkwardly together, surrounded by a handful of other parents, some in suits, some in scrubs, all smiling politely as the kids presented their versions of what work meant. When Mrs. Proder, Halbrook, called Lily's name, Jack leaned over and whispered, "She hates public speaking." Natalie gave him a quiet smile. "Then she's braver than most." Lily stood up, ponytail bobbing, holding a crumpled paper in one hand and a drawing in the other. She cleared her throat, eyes scanning the room. "My name is Lily Miller, and my dad is a mechanic." She smiled, proud. "He fixes people's cars, even when they don't have a lot of money. He stays late sometimes, and he's tired a lot, but he still makes me pancakes on Saturdays." A few parents chuckled softly. Lily held up her drawing, her dad standing in front of the garage, tools in hand, a tiny cartoon version of her sitting on his shoulders. To the side was a woman with brown hair and a sparkly scarf, holding a wrench and smiling. "This is his garage," she explained. "He almost had to give it up because a big company wanted to take it, but then he met someone who helped him." She glanced toward the back of the room, and Natalie sat up a little straighter, her heart catching. "She's his friend," Lily said simply. "She came back even after she made a mistake, and now she's trying to help other garages too, not just his. I think that's even cooler than fixing cars." Jack lowered his head, just slightly. Natalie felt her eyes sting. Lily beamed. "My dad says people aren't always what they seem at first, but the good ones find a way to prove it. I think she's one of the good ones." The room broke into soft applause. Natalie clapped too, quickly wiping at her eyes when no one was looking. Sometimes redemption didn't come from the top down. Sometimes it came from the smallest voices, telling the biggest truths. Jack stood just outside the garage, wiping his hands on a shop rag as the late afternoon sun cast long golden shadows across the lot. Natalie stepped out of her car, holding a folder, not the kind filled with corporate contracts, but something worn, creased at the edges, as if it had been opened and reopened a dozen times. He raised an eyebrow. "Another buyout offer?" She smiled faintly. "Not even close." They sat on the old bench out front, the same one Natalie had passed by during her first visit to Briarwood. Now, it felt like neutral ground, something between her world and his. Natalie opened the folder and handed him a sheet. It wasn't covered in numbers or legal jargon. It was simple. Clear. A cooperative network. "Not a franchise," she said, watching his reaction. "A partnership. We help independent garages like yours modernize where you want. Tools, tech, training, but no ownership. No buyouts. You keep your name, your people, your pride. We give support, not strings." Jack read silently, jaw set. "What's the catch?" "No catch," she said. "Hartman helps fund upgrades and resources in exchange for shared visibility. You decide how it works for your shop. And we learn from you what's worth preserving, what matters to the people who don't live by spreadsheets." He looked at her then, a long, measured glance. "You're rewriting the whole system for this?" "I'm rewriting my system," she said. "I thought the only way to grow was to own everything. Turns out it's not. Turns out connection is worth more than control." Jack leaned back, arms crossed. "And the board's okay with this?" "They weren't," Natalie said, with a small, almost mischievous smile. "I reminded them it's my name on the building." Jack nodded slowly, handing the paper back. "You really believe in this?" She met his eyes. "I believe in you, and if this works here, it can work anywhere." A long pause passed between them, thick with everything unsaid. Finally, Jack stood. "All right." "All right?" she echoed, surprised. You get one chance, he said, but if you start putting logos on my window. She laughed. No logos, I promise. And for the first time in a long time, they weren't standing on opposite sides of anything. They were building something together. The boardroom was colder than usual, air-conditioned and airless, a space built for numbers, not nuance. 12 pairs of eyes watched Natalie as she stood at the front, her tablet closed, her hands empty. She hadn't come armed with charts or forecasts this time. Just conviction. Richard Doyle, the board chair, adjusted his cufflinks and leaned back. You called this meeting. I assume you've reconsidered your position on the Briarwood acquisition. I have, Natalie said clearly. I'm not doing it. A ripple of murmurs broke out, but she held up a hand, calm and steady. Because I'm doing something better. Better? One of the younger board members scoffed. Than full acquisition and control of a primary region? Yes, Natalie said, unwavering. I'm proposing a cooperative model. One that supports independent garages while bringing them into a shared network without removing their identity, ownership, or value to the community. Another board member frowned. That's charity. That's not sustainable growth. No, Natalie said, stepping forward. It's long-term investment in loyalty and reputation. We don't need to erase these places. We need to learn from them. These are the shops our company was founded on. Places where people knew their mechanic's name. Where trust came standard. You want market control? Build with them, not over them. And you think this makes us more competitive? Doyle asked flatly. No, she replied. I think it makes us human again. Silence. She reached into her bag and pulled out an old leather journal, her father's. This is Charles Hartman's first notebook, she said. In it, he wrote that success wasn't about dominance. It was about service. About keeping a single mom's car running so she could get to work. About helping people who needed it. We've lost that. And if we don't get it back, all our profit margins won't mean a damn thing when the soul of this company is gone. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, the youngest board member nodded. If it's sustainable, if we test it in one market, Briarwood is the test, Natalie said. Doyle looked at her long and hard, then finally exhaled. You're staking your reputation on this. I'm staking our future on it, she said. And this time no one disagreed. The banner read, Miller's Garage, reopening Community Day, hand-painted by Lily and strung between two tall ladders out front. It fluttered in the spring breeze, catching the sun just right as townsfolk began to trickle in, neighbors, old customers, curious passers-by, even folks from the next town over. Tables lined the lot, covered in checkered cloths and trays of homemade food. The local bakery had donated cookies. The high school jazz band played a few warm-up tunes on folding chairs by the entrance. Kids darted between cars, chasing balloons and licking popsicles. It wasn't just a reopening, it felt like a revival. Jack stood beside the newly painted garage door, wearing his usual flannel and work boots, but there was something lighter in his expression. His sleeves were rolled, hands smudged with grease, and yet every time someone came up to shake his hand, he smiled like he was seeing an old friend, because most of them were. Natalie stood nearby, not in a blazer or heels, but in jeans and a windbreaker, her hair tied back, clipboard in one hand, offering check-in forms for the free tune-ups they were running that afternoon. She wasn't just present, she was part of it. A little boy ran up to Jack, pointing at his mom's minivan. You're the guy who fixed our heater. My mom says you're better than YouTube. Jack laughed. Don't tell YouTube. In the back, Lily gave tours of the garage to any kid willing to follow her. This is the lift, she announced proudly. Dad lets me press the button sometimes, but only when he's watching. Natalie caught Jack watching her, that quiet look she'd come to know, half-guarded, half amazed. She stepped beside him, bumping his arm gently. Not bad for a little garage on the edge of town, she said. He nodded. Never seen it this full. She glanced around, smile soft. They showed up for you, Jack. They always would have. You just needed a reason to let them. He looked at her, his voice low. You helped give me one. From the speakers near the door, music played some old country ballad neither of them recognized, but it fit. And for the first time in a long time, the garage wasn't just a place for fixing cars. It was a place for fixing what really mattered. The sun was slipping behind the trees, casting long golden streaks across the gravel lot. The crowd had thinned, the laughter now quieter, softer families heading home with full bellies and tuned-up engines, kids drowsy from sugar and sunshine. A few porch lights flickered on down the street, and the town settled into the kind of hush that only comes after a good day. Natalie stood near the open garage bay, arms folded as she watched Lily twirl in slow circles, dancing to a slow country song drifting from the borrowed speaker system. Her curls bounced with every spin, her joy completely unself-conscious. Jack was wiping his hands on a rag when he saw her. Not Natalie Hartman, CEO of anything. Not the woman who had once almost taken everything from him. Just her. Hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, a smudge of flour on her jacket sleeve from earlier when she'd helped serve pie. She looked tired. And beautiful. And, for once, like she belonged in Briarwood more than anywhere else. He walked over, slow and steady. "You dance?" he asked, voice low. Natalie blinked, surprised. "What?" He held out a hand. "You know, one of those basic human activities they never teach in boardrooms." She stared at him for a bee unsure, maybe even shy. Then she laughed softly, took his hand, and let him lead her out onto the empty patch of pavement beside the garage. The music played on, slow and sweet, and they moved without needing much rhythm. Jack's hand rested lightly on her back. Her fingers curled against his shoulder. They barely swayed, just enough to call it dancing, but it was more than enough to feel real. "This isn't about the company," he said after a long silence. She nodded. "I know. Not about Lily, or the town. Not even the garage." "I know," she whispered again. His eyes met hers. "Just you and me." The sky burned orange at the edges, dusk settling around them like a slow exhale. There was no past between them in that moment. No future to guess at. Just the quiet thrum of a song, a worn lot beneath their feet, and the space between them finally gone. The last of the folding chairs had been stacked. The banner had come down, the tables cleared, the leftover cookies packed into a paper bag for Lily to take home. The garage was quiet now, the hum of celebration fading into the cool, calm rhythm of evening. Jack stood beside his truck, sipping the last of a lukewarm soda, watching the stars blink to life over Briarwood. The familiar creak of boots on gravel drew his attention. Natalie was leaning against the passenger side door, arms folded, hair a little windblown. She looked up at him with that same smile, the one she didn't wear at board meetings or in magazine interviews. This one was just for him. "So," Jack said, tipping his head toward her, "you planning to break down around here more often?" She grinned. "Only if you'll fix me again." He laughed, shaking his head. "You really need to work on your metaphors." "I've been practicing," she said, stepping closer. "You're just a tough audience." They stood there in easy silence for a moment, the kind that didn't demand words. Just the sound of crickets in the distance and the soft breeze rolling through the pine trees beyond the lot. "You could have gone back," Jack said quietly. "Back to your towers and your boardrooms and whatever world you had before all this." "I still might have to," she replied. "But if I do, it won't be the same. I'm not the same." He studied her for a long moment. "Good," she raised an eyebrow. "That a compliment, Miller?" "Might be," he said, shrugging. She reached out, brushed her fingers across his knuckles. "I don't know what's next. For me. For us. But I do know this place. This town, it got under my skin." Jack smiled, his eyes soft. "Yeah, it does that." The stars shone a little brighter overhead. The truck creaked as Natalie leaned back against it once more, and Jack stood beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her shoulder against his. Maybe they hadn't started with the truth. But what they had now, it was built to last.